My name's Sasha Pete, and I'm joined by a fantastic individual. This man, born in Scotland, came to Australia and tore up the old Phillips National Soccer League. I'm joined none other than the great King Kenny Taylor. Welcome, Kenny, to this conversation.
Good to be with you, Sasha. I look forward to having a chat and telling a few kind of stories and obviously just going behind the scenes and finding out how I came here and so forth and how things materialise. But yeah, no, really good to be with you.
Tell us, Kenny, how did you fall in love with our great game?
Well, look, in Scotland, obviously that's where I was born. In Scotland, that's the national pastime. It's football, and you tend to kind of just grow up, playing the game, as a kid. So there's probably not one kind of point I can remember. I had a ball all the time playing football. And my father played part-time football in Scotland. He played for two teams, Kilmarnock and Clyde. My grandfather played. He was ironically played junior football, which is a fairly kind of tough league in Scotland, and he played in the 1920s. And he obviously was, and again, he passed away before I was actually born, so I didn't actually get to meet him, which was a bit of a shame. But no, he was a bit of a renowned player at Drogheda Winton Rovers, which is a junior team, ironically, who I played for a period of time after I'd come up from England before I came to Australia. But no, look, the games, it's ingrained in you. It's like it could be Italy, it could be France, it could be Germany. It's just when you grow up as kids in that era. I know things have changed now with kids. Kids are there's a lot of different distractions now with kids and so forth. But then that was the kind of main thing. Okay,
so what was the first junior club, or was it playing at a school? Where walk us through when you first played in the team.
So I played actually. It was before. I'm not going into too much detail, but over there in Scotland, I played kind of like a primary school football, and then I actually went to a school called the Drogheda Academy, which was not far from the school I was attending. Ironically, again, they didn't play football; they played rugby. They were a rugby school. So I actually had to go and join the Boys Brigade, who actually had a football team to actually play football. So I'm talking like, when I was probably 10 or 11 and so forth. And then I progressed from there and we played, and then all the schools became comprehensive, so all the schools amalgamated. So then the school that I was with, which was still classified as Drogheda Academy, actually had a football team. So we actually had a team that won, championships and so forth, and cups and so forth, which was in under 15s. Other than that, I actually get picked up with, as I mentioned before we started the broadcast, a team called Prestwick Star, which was affiliated to Kilmarnock, and that was like an under 15 team. And again, it was a select players that were picked to play with this team, and that entails scouts coming to watch games and so forth. And so I played at the school level, with success, and I played with Prestwick Star. I actually played with Kilmarnock Star, which was the older team. It was under Kilmarnock's flag, and so I had a couple of games with them. But again, you'd scouts come to the game. Again, I think it was maybe Tottenham, maybe Liverpool, different. So you get into the dressing room before some games, and boys would say, "No, I've got Leeds United watch me today," or "I've got we're up Southampton." Anyway, so as I say, I ended up signing. I just had turned 15. I signed an apprenticeship with Ipswich Town, and the kind of irony there was, in my bedroom I had posters of various things, and probably all sport. And above my bed I had a photograph of this football team. Now I don't, for the life of me, I still can't work out how I actually put this up, but it was actually Ipswich Town, and I actually didn't know where Ipswich was. And actually, it's in East Anglia, obviously. So it was a bit of an irony. So myself and another boy that played for Ayrshire schoolboys, a boy called George Burley, went down in trial. We were the first two trials from Scotland to go down to Ipswich. And this was the start of Ipswich having a youth policy. And it was obviously very successful. And we obviously both get signed as apprentices. And that was like a 3-year apprenticeship. playing football. So that was kind of the foray in, and obviously the manager was Bobby Robson, who obviously everybody knows. So it was that was a kind of foray into to playing. So it was a bit of an eye opener. Again, coming to Australia from Scotland is certainly a big deal. But in those days, going from Scotland to England was equally a big deal as well. So there's a lot of young boys that went down to England to clubs and had homesickness and come back. I was probably, I was going to say fortunate. It didn't really affect me. So, and obviously there's a few stories, but I won't get into any sort of detail of things that happened down there. But we were very successful as a club, and I certainly remember playing in trials and some of the quality of the players. And they ended up with 15 apprentices, and that was, I say, was the start of their kind of youth policy, which obviously the success, and it's a bit disappointing at the moment where they are now, but they obviously went and won the Europa Cup and they won the FA Cup, and so that was the kind of start of them bringing all the youth players through, which was good. And
describe to me what Robson was like as a character.
Oh, he was very. I was going to say very effervescent. He was obviously an extremely quality player when he played. Obviously he don't play for England. For a number of times he played, but I think his big success, I suppose, was that he was a very good. It's probably, you can't really say it nowadays. It's a man manager. He was very good at that. He's very good at kind of trying to motivate players and so forth. And I think he'd a pretty strong backroom staff. But he was, to me, I suppose the only disappointment, because I didn't actually sign professionally, but that's probably the kind of disappointing thing. And again, we're all experts in hindsight. There's certain things you might change, but there's not a lot of things I would have changed, because obviously we had success. But Robson was certainly a character, and proven over the journey.
So, I mean, but you're playing in an era, not like now where there's the bench, the squad's 23 men, or, like you've got 50 people on the books, right? Yeah. Back then, there'd be like a couple of people on the bench, right? So the first team squad is quite tight.
Yes.
So that gives people an idea of the quality of the people who don't sign a professional contract. So, you're at Ipswich Town. You're there for 3 years. You're 18. Walk us through where you go next and why.
Well, what happened, as I say, again, as I mentioned previously, I suppose the success of the actual team was the kind of demise of my future at the club. So what happened was I just turned 17, and we just lost. Actually, I scored a goal. We played Aston Villa in the secondary cup for juniors or youth in England, the Southern Junior Floodlit Cup. So I scored the goal at Villa Park, and we came back to Portman Road, the following week, and they beat us 2-1. So anyway, what transpired was, obviously, as I mentioned before, they signed, I think it was 7 or 8 players. So again, I had to go into a meeting with Robson, but I still had a year to kind of go. So he more or less approached it with, which was quite, well, it's kind of funny now, but it wasn't kind of funny then. But he said to me, what clubs are in Scotland, where you're from? Well, there's only 2. There's Kilmarnock and Ayr. I think he was obviously, he tried to kind of break it gently. The fact of the matter was that obviously I was kind of surplus to the requirement, which was obviously disappointing at the time. So I still had to play, I still had to stay there. But what happened was that he was a guy called Ron Bradley, was coaching Scunthorpe United, which were in the 4th division. And Ron Bradley had played with Bobby Robson, I think, at West Brom. And so so obviously what he had said to me, he said, look, more or less said, look, we're not going to sign you professional, but what we will do, we'll certainly help you try and get another club, obviously in England, or in fact, I think one of the tours, we obviously did quite a few tours to Europe, and we did a tour in Holland, and there's another guy, I'm trying to think of the guy's name, it was manager of Den Haag. He was, again, pretty close to Bobby Robson. So they actually wanted me to go over and trial and possibly sign with them, when I was still at Ipswich. But anyway, the bottom line was I stayed at Ipswich, and then I ended up going to Scunthorpe. So Scunthorpe was quite an experience. And obviously, the probably the 2 main brothers, three people that are very kind of prominent, sports people that have obviously played for for Scunthorpe, you know, Kevin Keegan, Ray Clements, and Ian Botham. So obviously they kept going on about, you know, Kevin Keegan and Ray Clements and so forth. But anyway, I managed to break into the first team. My second game was a League Cup game at Main Road against Manchester City, and I was actually marking Colin Bell. So I mentioned this previously. You know, it was quite it was exciting, but it was also very challenging as well. So, but then what transpired after that was that the team obviously weren't doing particularly well in the actual league, and the manager got the sack. And then what happened was this new manager came in, and he just basically just completely went right through the club. And unfortunately, again, I was surplus to requirements, so I ended up getting back up to Scotland, and I actually had to get a job, which was a bit of a shock to my system. And again, also pretty young, and actually got a job as a postman, which was quite ironic for about over probably a year, probably 18 months. And then just say Jim Adam come over from Australia, and then, you know, I came to Australia, and I hadn't turned 21. I was still 20. I actually had my 21st over here, although I didn't even have a party because I wasn't feeling very well. And yeah, so that's what happened. So I came to Australia when I was 20, 21.
And so, what are your expectations? You know, playing football in the UK and then coming to Australia. What were your first impressions of Melbourne, and why Heidelberg? What was the
well? I suppose, you know, it was Fitzroy, and because of the Greek team, and I suppose not knowing an awful lot about Australian football, you know, where it was at and so forth, and what standard was and so forth. But I suppose the exciting thing was that, you know, this is going to be the first national sporting code was going to be playing nationally. So that was probably a kind of an excitement in itself. You know, previously to that, you know, I had opportunities to come to actually to go to New Zealand. I had a chance that a club called Nelson United there was a possibility of me going there, but that didn't happen, didn't materialise. And then also, interestingly enough, another club in Melbourne, which is kind of renowned, and people who maybe are listening, maybe not, but it's renowned for having, I'll call them Scousers, you know, people from Liverpool, Slavia, sorry, who also that didn't happen as well. But coming to Australia, you know, for the first time, coming off the plane, you know, I suppose you get this kind of thing of, you know, it's a sunburnt country and so forth. And obviously, I've realised it's obviously not a sunburnt country. I mean, you live in Melbourne, and the further lower you go, you know, luckily I haven't been lived in Tasmania. So, but I stayed in a beautiful establishment in Fitzroy Street in St Kilda. And my first memory was coming past, and I saw this ground, and it was the Fitzroy Oval, and I thought that looks a lovely kind of venue. And obviously that was a cricket venue or a football venue or so forth. So, but look, it was the one thing I will say, you know, obviously joining, you know, Fitzroy and obviously Hellas were obviously two Greek teams. So they had, you know, because Melbourne was supposed to be the biggest Greek population outside Athens or outside Greece, you know, so there was plenty of supporters available, less distractions as they are now. And I suppose from my perspective, I've always said this, that you come with you come with a reputation. You could be playing First Division, you could be playing Premier League, playing Europe, or you could just be playing junior football. And there's plenty of cases to be made for that. But you basically start from scratch here. So you come in, and I suppose looking back now, I'm probably relatively fortunate that the fans or the crowd, the people took to me, and obviously I suppose I can perform and did okay. So that certainly helps. But you know, it was just not knowing what the standard was, but again, the excitement of you having you can go to Sydney and different places and travel, but it's all said and done. It's not a holiday. You know, you're on a plane, you get off a plane, you go to a hotel, you go and play the game, you get back on the hotel, you get back on the plane, you come back to Melbourne. But the one thing I will say was that the camaraderie, because most of us, well, certainly I didn't have any family here, and I think a few other guys didn't have it either. So that was our family, and I've always said this. You know, Heidelberg are the Fitzroy were the family club. So we basically socialised together, we played together, we trained together, we socialised together. So that was probably the kind of key, I suppose, when all said and done, was of the success.
For talk to me about the some of the other characters in the at first side 77. Who are some of the other characters in the team?
Well, I suppose probably the first people is obviously late Paddy Bannon. You know, Pat was seen as the and I used to kind of laugh sometimes because, you know, Pat obviously, you know, his kind of grey hair, and Pat might have only been maybe in his late 20s, you know, but obviously people kind of looked at him as if he was a lot older than what he actually was. But Pat was probably the kind of father figure, and I think if you speak to most of the guys that are still with us today and played in that kind of era, you know, Pat was the kind of person who had come previously. And I think one of the other things which is probably quite to note as well, that the Scottish contingent certainly to Heidelberg and Fitzroy was very, very prominent. You know, we had players coming previously, you know, the likes of Ian Gibson and George Gillan, you know, Paddy, Vince. So there was a good John Kennedy, Jack Riley. You know, so there's a lot of kind of history behind it. So I think they were quite confident that, you know, they were going to get, you know, half decent players. So, but you know, Paddy was there. You know, you've got a multitude of them. You know, certainly in the dressing room. You know, Gary Cole and Jimmy Campbell, who obviously I'm still, you know, most of the players, if not all of them, you know, in that era, I'm still, you know, friends with. Not, as I say, I don't see them all the time, but you know, we always catch up every so often. Branko Bulovic was and again, known obviously that Australia had qualified in '74 in Germany. You know, Branko was obviously a renowned player, and he certainly was. He was extremely very quick, very knowledgeable. He was a great player. So I think he was good to play with. So I think I kind of benefited from, you know, his talents. But no, there was a multitude of characters, if you want to classify them. So yeah.
And which were the biggest games? So when you play in those early years of the National Soccer League, where were the biggest rivalries?
Well, as far as crowds were concerned, obviously it would be Hellas. You know, you play Hellas, and we were playing games, and again, you've got to kind of question some of the kind of reporting. I was watching something the other night, and they were going on about, you know, the first game. You know, we played at Sydney City, and even I think in some of the kind of the annuals, it gives you know the history of, you know, where the games were and the crowd and all so forth. And they keeps coming up and saying it's Olympic Park, but it wasn't Olympic Park; it was Middle Park. But, you know, playing Hellas, that was Sydney City. So sorry, Sydney City, as far as rivalry, they were probably the main rivals. The only thing with them is, because obviously they're backing, they obviously had, you know, strong financial backing, no crowd, so no support, which was disappointing. But they had terrific teams, terrific teams when we played them. But as far as crowds were concerned, you know, you're looking at you know, certainly Hellas. You know, even like, you know, we played Footscray. You know, the local kind of derbies as such were good. But again, even before that came, you know, the stories I would hear, you know, that Juventus would get, you know, 30,000 there, and you know, Ringwood had a team which was full of Dutch internationals and stuff like that there. So, you know, again, going back to the fact that we were playing in the National League, it was probably a bit more exciting. So, and travelling about the countryside.
Who did you room with when you were?
Jimmy Campbell. Jimmy and I are pretty close. So yeah, no, it was probably Jimmy Campbell. So again, I could probably get in a few stories about things when we used to travel away, but I better not unless I speak to my lawyer. But no, look, it was always, you know, I'll never forget the first trip away. We played Canberra, and we won the game. I think I know Branko scored about 10 minutes to go, and we're playing it. I'm trying to think, it wasn't Bruce Stadium, it was the Oval. Anyway, we played the game, and we finished. We came off, and there was a plane strike, so we had to get a bus back. So we get in the bus, and obviously you're talking 14 hours, whatever it is, coming back to Melbourne. So we get in the bus, and then so the bus starts getting to Canberra. So we're kind of looking at each other, going, because we're up the back of the bus, and obviously there's a bit of a euphoria because we've won the game. But anyway, we've gone back into Canberra, and obviously what we did, because of the plane strike, we picked up passengers going back to Melbourne. So we've got all these other passengers on the bus, but that didn't stop us from having a good sing-song on the way back. But prior to that, it was, as I said, it was our first trip away, and Jim Ngopis, who was our president. So we're staying at the hotel I was in Canberra. So it was the night before the game. Jim Adams was the coach, and we So Jim McGuff said, look, it's his first time we've been away. Look, you guys, you can have, if you can have a beer, because if you stay at home, before a home game, some guys maybe have a couple of beers with their dinner or a glass of wine, whatever it may be. And he says, look, there's no problem there. Peter Blasby, our goalkeeper, next thing this ice bucket comes up and a big bottle of wine goes in. So anyway, look, we weren't silly about it. We obviously just had what we normally have at home, have a beer or whatever, a glass of wine. But obviously Jim Adams took a wee bit of kind of offence to that. So of course, first thing the next morning, he actually kind of hastily had a very short training session. And I suppose it was to be some sort of kind of punishment, but it was all said and done. We obviously won the game, but as I say, coming back in the bus, it was quite funny because we were up at the back of the bus with people in front of us who obviously just flight passengers going back to Melbourne, and at the very front of the bus was Jim Adams, who obviously was a bit of a kind of, he was a wee bit sulking. I'll just leave it at that. So, but no, that was probably, and again, it was about 13 or 14 hours. And I've said this story before. Arthur, God rest his soul, Arthur McMillan, who was a bit of a singer, was on the bus and Arthur wouldn't sing. And we got to about an hour and a half, 2 hours into the journey, and we kept saying, Arthur, sing. And Arthur was an artist in the 60s, 50s and 60s and 70s, and an American guy called Gene Pitney. Now, Arthur's voice was very similar to Gene Pitney's. So anyway, 2 hours into the journey, Arthur starts singing. So be honest, he's great, Arthur's singing. But the problem was Arthur never shut up. He kept singing until we got back to Melbourne. We couldn't shut up. So, but that was just one of the kind of stories that we had. But again, as I mentioned before, it was the camaraderie, it was the kind of closeness together. What we tend to do, even certainly with the home games, and obviously the wives, they're obviously a very important part of your success or non-success. But they obviously used to get together. So what we do in a home game, we ended up going back to somebody's house and having a bit of a party. And I'm sure there's a multitude of other teams, in that same situation in Melbourne and Victoria. Brilliant.
And so you stayed at Heidelberg for a number of years. And then your next club, you transferred to another Victorian club.
Yeah.
How did that transpire? And
well, I'll tell you what actually happened. I actually went back to Scotland in '79. Okay. So I'd been in a situation where, I was working. I didn't have any. I wasn't a tradesperson. Didn't have any kind of skills. I worked a few jobs, which was, and playing it obviously at Fitzroy. There's obviously connections. I managed to get a couple of jobs through different people within the club. Anyway, what transpired? My son was born in '78. In Scotland, so we came back in '79, and we actually stayed in Bruce Street, Preston. My wife and I, Barbara and I, and obviously the baby. But Barbara couldn't drive. I was working, training 3 or 4 nights a week, so it wasn't working out. I ended up getting back in '79 back to Scotland, and I was going back basically for good. And then what happened was that Jim Gopis phoned me up, and I since found out after that it was a guy called Sam Galopoulos who was a president as well of the club, had kind of financed me to come back out, and things weren't kind of materialising in Scotland. So I came back out in 1980. Now, coming back out in 1980, as you may be aware, obviously that was a very successful year for the club. Well, I came out and the season had started, and I think Gary Cole, he scored about 3 hat-tricks already. He was just on fire, but the team were on fire, and obviously Len McKenna was there. So it was very difficult for me to get back into the actual team, but I kind of persevered, and at one point, John Marguerite, he was talking about coaching. John Marguerite, when I was at Heidelberg, was probably, I suppose, a kind of fan of me, and he was always playing me and encouraging me and so forth. Anyway, he was at Ellis, and Vince Bannon was playing. I'll never forget it. Going to a game, there was a double header at Middle Park, and Vince Bannon saying to me, he was warming up. He was playing the game before our game, and he was warming up, and he said, John wants you to come to Ellis. But I just come back into the country, and I suppose it was an element of, loyalty, and sometimes there's kind of blind loyalty. But anyway, I stayed with Heidelberg, and I kind of worked my way back into the team over a period of time. So, but then what happened was that then I think it was 1982, 83. A guy called Ken Morton came in. He was a coach, English guy, and again, obviously, surplus to requirement. So. I actually went on trial with Adelaide City. I'll never forget it. I get asked to go over there to trial. Now, I'm not saying, trying to be not be egotistical by any means, but when you've played 130 odd games for a club, or whoever it was, and scored not an awful lot of goals, but contributed, strongly to the success, I suppose. But then you're getting asked to go in a trial. So I did it. I went to Adelaide City trial. We played Adelaide, Croatia, I think it was, at the sports field. Anyway, it was about 35 degrees. Stinking hot. I scored a goal in my head, which is totally unusual. I think I've only scored 2 goals in my head in my life. Anyway, I scored a goal, and then I came back, but nothing really, nothing materialised with Adelaide, which is, I suppose, disappointing. But the only thing there is that you've come to Melbourne, and you're kind of roots down in Melbourne. I know if you're a professional football coach, whatever, you go to where there's a job going. So that would have meant, rooting the family and so forth. So that was a discussion to be had if it had come to fruition, but didn't. So I came back to Melbourne, and about 2 weeks later, I signed for Footscray JUST. I was there for, I think it was Bobby McLaughlin, Scottish coach, who was the coach at the time. So I was there and obviously there's 2 or 3 coaches that came as I was there and gone. So I was there for, I think, probably about a year and a half, maybe 2 years, if it was that. And then Jim Tansey had come to Footscray. And then from there, we went to, both of us, and I've always said this, it's like buy one, get one for nothing. So Peter Orleton at the time was a coach in Croydon, and he basically, as it's been classified in the annuals, it was Dad's Army getting put together. So again, Dad's Army was full of quality. So that was my Footscray thing. Was, I'll be honest with you, I've not got an awful lot of I don't say fond memories, but it was quite difficult there. Again, there was the changing of coaches, not too many times, but there was enough to kind of put you off, sort of thing. So
yeah,
I got to a stage where I was in and out of the team, and things weren't happening, sort of thing, and it became a bit different. And again, when you're playing a team are not prominent in the actual league, you're always kind of battling, scrapping, sort of thing. So it always makes things a wee bit more difficult. So
we're talking about what years in at JUST? So it's 84.
It'd be 80. It was. I'm trying to think. It was 80. It'd be 80. Yeah, it'd be 83, 84. I think I've got, because obviously I've got quite a bit of material and photographs and so forth. But I think I'm in a team photograph. I think it's 83 at Heidelberg. Heidelberg, it would be Heidelberg. But I didn't obviously, that might have been pre-season, but I didn't stay there. I was only there for a short period, then obviously went to Footscray. Yeah. But I think it would be, because I think I signed with Croydon, I think it was about 85, maybe 85, 80, because I know we won the state league in 86.
Yeah.
85, 86, yeah. So it might be a year and a half, 2 years at Footscray. So
and this is, I mean, at this time is a transition of a number of coaches. Just before, I think in 85, 86, they brought out the Red Star legend, Shekalaras.
That's right.
And then, so did you spend any time with Shekalaras? He came after you?
He came after me. I'm trying to think of I think Cheda might have been the last coach I was under at Footscray. So, but again, look, I'm sure that, I'm sure you're aware, and I'm sure probably people that listen to this, if there is anybody listening, I'm sure they are. But there's a situation where, the politics that just have ruined the game. Not say ruined the game, but they probably have ruined the game over a long period of time, because there's always, there's always factions want to take over this faction, and the rules change and so forth like that. And unfortunately, players become like pawns. They're like kind of meeting the sandwich. They end up like, one faction wants you in, and the next faction wants you out, sort of thing. So it's always kind of difficult to manage that. So, but no, look, going to Croydon was probably a kind of bit of a breath of fresh air. And again, it was kind of catching up with guys that I had played against. And again, it was, you're talking quality, David Brogan, Graham French, obviously Peter Orleton, Jimmy Tansey. Again, we won the state league. Alan Kerr.
So was Peter coaching and playing, or just
he was a player coach? Yeah, he was a player coach, sort of thing. But I think he tended to I think he obviously kept himself on the side more than anything else. I think he didn't start games, put it that way. I don't think there wouldn't have been many games he would have started. I think he brought himself off the bench, every so often, sort of thing. But he obviously felt that the players he brought to the club were sufficient to get the job. He did, which was good.
And obviously, he's got the pedigree of being part of that 74 team that played for Australia in the World Cup. And he's massed a number of other British boys there at Croydon. So,
we used to have. I'll be honest with you, I'm not. It probably sounds a bit disparaging to Peter, but there wasn't a lot of coaching because you talk about players. It's like I don't remember trying to watch. It was it might have been a thing on Graham Souness signing for Liverpool, and I think he signed from Middlesbrough, and he was in the dressing room and he was waiting for direction. And I think it was Joe Fagan, one of the backroom staff said, "Look, we've signed you for X amount of money." He says, "You can do the job. We don't need to tell you. You can go and do it." And that was kind of the same kind of situation at Croydon. But what we used to do was, I think a Tuesday night we'd have a bit of a game, so forth. But anyway, the big thing was Scotland versus England. So we had all that, and that was quite. And some of those games, they were probably more fierce than the actual games at the weekend. I'll give you a very quick. Alec Livingston played with us as well. Alec was kind of played up front, played kind of wide. Was a good player, very skillful, scored a few goals. Anyway, we used to have the Scotland-England game, and Alec Livingston used to be scared of Alan Kerr, who was both Scottish, and they're both in the same team. But he was actually petrified of Alec because it was one of those situations. But look, it was again. Along the lines of the Heidelberg Fitzroy situation, it was a kind of strong camaraderie with the players, and again, when you've got success, things are a lot easier than when you've not got success. People tend to kind of when things are not going so well, there's obviously a lot more criticism on people, and people tend to have a go at more people and so forth. But we, as I said,
winning covers over a lot of the cracks, doesn't it? So
exactly.
A winning football side it tends to be a happy one. So you got success there at Croydon as well. You won the league.
Yeah, we won the state league. Yeah. So I think we won it with about 3 games to go, and again, it was at the old ground. They've obviously moved to a new ground. So many years later, but I think remember it was Laurie McKenna told a story that when he was playing at Box Hill, and because if you know what the old ground was like, it wasn't a slope, but they had a big tree was behind the goal, and I think the ball, somebody hit the ball and it come off the tree, come back down again, and so forth. And it was one of those kind of comical type thing, but the ground was. Certainly when we played, the crowds we used to get, and certainly the social club afterwards was like, especially the home games, especially the year we won it, where just place was packed. It was just, and again, because of all the players that played in the team had come from all different teams, and obviously we played on a Sunday, and most of the guys had played on a Saturday, so a lot of people would come and watch us on a Sunday, and vice versa, sort of thing. But no, it was as I say, it was. It was a good vibe at Croydon, sort of thing. So,
and from Croydon, tell us. So as a kid, you played up front and you scored lots of goals. As a striker, and so you I think at Fitzroy and Heidelberg, you spent a lot of time in midfield. And you're probably a bit of a cult classic there because you had really big hair, the light coloured hair, and
people classify it as ginger. So and I'm trying to. I think it's actually come from my mother's side of the family. But just on that very quickly, I'll never forget. It was people. People kind of question. Is it your real hair? Well, obviously in those era you had like Valderrama, you had all these Scottish players, a lot of players had, even in our team, guys like Theo had a big mop of hair, Peter Blasby, and mine was probably slightly bigger. But I'll never forget, and obviously it was a perm. I'll classify that as a perm. But what actually happened was, I'll never forget it. I actually got my hair cut, and we played at Olympic Park. I can't remember who we played. But I just remember running out at the Olympic Park, And I'm sure somebody went, "Who is that? Who is that person?" I don't recognise them, because obviously that was, I suppose, a bit of like an identity from my point of view. And I suppose it's the analogy I would make would be, it was like a player wearing a pair of white boots for the very first time, or a colour pair of boots. You know, it's like, oh, you know, the establishment would frown on that. But when it's all said and done, if you can wear a pair of white boots, or you can have a kind of big hairstyle, what you might call it, as long as you can produce, that's what it's all about. And you know, it's obviously if you don't produce, then obviously you've got a few problems. So yeah, that was just one of those instances. I kind of ran out, and I'm sure somebody said, "Who is that?" Because didn't recognise me, because obviously they're just used to me with a big mop of hair. So,
yeah.
Anyway, so yeah. Sorry, I should.
You played with many internationals. So you're talking about Branko Buljevic, you know, Charlie Yankos ended up playing for the Socceroos. So Gary Cole was up front at the time at Heidelberg. Gary Cole was up front for Australia, scoring goals. You know, he had a very, very quick and fabulous shot on him. Of the internationals that you played with or against, who are the ones that really stood out for you to say, okay, this player's quality there, that sort of 30% above?
There's I suppose if I met him, I could mention again. I use this word quite a few times. Multitude. There's a lot of players. If you look at Heidelberg, the Heidelberg team was, I think there was like 8 players or maybe 9 players that were internationals. In fact, Heidelberg were the only club, and it'll never happen ever again, had three captains in their team. They had the captain of the Victorian team, they had the captain of the club team, obviously Heidelberg, Fitzroy Alexander Heidelberg, and they had the captain of the Australian team. The 3 players were Paddy Bannon was the captain of the club, Jimmy Tansey was captain of Victoria, and Jimmy Rooney was captain of Australia. So that is a unique, that will never ever happen again. And I didn't know that fact till Jimmy Rooney did a thing for the club did a history in some DVDs last year, which was great. And he actually mentioned that. So that was just something out of the blue. But again, as far as individual players, it's very different. You know, you look at players I played against, like Adji Muniz and Murray Barnes and Tony Henderson, and it's at the club level, obviously, any of the players that played, Theo or Theo Selamides or Charlie or Gary or Jamie Payton, John Eisendorn, just the list is endless. I've said this before. One of the players who, Jarko Jarkov, who played with Preston, played with Sydney, played for Australia. He was he was an exceptional talent, but there was an awful lot of players. But the one thing from my perspective, and I've said this publicly quite a few times, is that I didn't have any fear. Some people go, "Oh my God, we're playing against such and such." We need to. The classic of all time was the final in 1980. Everybody was worried about Kenny Bowden. Well, whether it was legal or illegal, if you've seen the actual video, Arthur McMillan again, the late Arthur McMillan sorted Kenny Bowden out. Whether it was it was. I was going to say it's line ball. The guy ended up in the running track. So and then basically never saw him for the rest of the game. He was obviously a very devastating player. He could just turn the game. So again, there's a lot of players. Sydney City, because from a team perspective, Marconi was good. Adelaide City, and even like you come back to Victoria. I see things on Facebook and different social medias, and I see these teams like Juventus, and you've got guys like the late John Dowie and the Bannon brothers playing there as well, and so there's a lot of good quality. Croatia, Tommy Cummins and Kenny Murphy, and the list goes on. Johnny Gardner and Steve Kokoska and Branko Chelina, and there's that many. I suppose when you lose a wee bit of kind of touch with what's actually happening now, and I've been to a few games. I've managed to kind of do a wee bit kind of special comments with Heidelberg, and I look at the teams, and again, not going to be too disparaging, but you think back and the era I played in, and you look at what's happening now, and even in the A League, you say to yourself, there's teams there that could, I'm not saying wipe the floor, but certainly be very competitive. nowadays with these teams. So I think, and again, playing in the pitches they're playing on, and playing with other things that happen, and I look at the game now, and I suppose I think back when I was a kid myself, and I think with my dad, making comments, and I'm saying you shouldn't make that kind of comment, but I'm kind of not saying start to kind of get like my dad, but I'm looking at things and I'm saying to myself, when these guys come on as a substitute and I've got all these books and it's all these iPads and all this sort of stuff, and it's like I'm saying to myself, just give them simple instructions to go and do X, Y, and Z. It's like the game is complicated by people, and the game is complicated from here up the way. But that's the game where you win it from here and up the way. You still have to be physically fit the rest of your body, but this is where the game happens. Now, you mentioned previously before about speed and so forth. Again, in Scotland, I thought I was quite quick. And again, that was the kind of the big fish in the little pond. But then when you get into the tadpole and the kind of the big ocean, you just realise that you're not quick at all. But I was probably fortunate because I was quite quick up here. I was quite alert and so forth. So that kind of gets you through. And you can see players who maybe are not naturally gifted as far as their speeds are concerned, but they've got very, very good football brains. And again, one of my big bugbears when I watch games nowadays, it doesn't matter what standard it is, if I see somebody giving the ball away and they're not under pressure, it just absolutely just annoys me to the end, because it just, and one of the first things I would do if I was coaching kids, certainly kids, is to get their heads up to see what's going on and it's about like playing snooker. The guy who plays snooker is not hitting the red ball; he's hitting all these other balls because he's playing 4 shots ahead. That type of scenario. So, but I know I've kind of this away from players, but again, there's that many internationals, and again, you look at the international thing now. You've got, and again, it's the same thing for all countries around the world. Everybody's looking and saying, "No, that's a great player over there. Look, go and find out where his granny was born or where his granda was born." That type of thing. And again, that's just the way it is. So whereas the era I played in, you're talking like the Scottish team especially, you had like world-class players, not just good players like Kenny Dalglish, Jimmy Johnstone, Jim Baxter. Again, it's a different era, and it's the old adage about was Maradona a better player than Pele? It's everything's objective, And again, from my perspective, the only thing I'd say with Pele was a guy obviously I would not say idolised, but was somebody I looked at. But the only thing, he didn't play outside in Brazil. He obviously played touring for Santos, ended up playing in America. But if you look at like some Maradona, the other one at the moment now, Messi's now gone to France. So I'm interested to see how he actually, does there. But if you look at him against Ronaldo, Ronaldo's gone. He's won championships in every. He's won it in Spain. He's won it in Italy. He's won it in Britain, or certainly in England so far. So it's certainly those type of players that that travel about and put their skills against these other countries and different cultures. I think they should be commended, especially a guy like Ronaldo, the Portuguese one, not the Brazilian one.
So after Croydon, you played at a number of other clubs. So it was Caulfield, Nunawading, Dandy City, and Brighton. Walk me through where does your heart gravitate to of all the clubs that you've played at? Where do you feel like you still belong?
Oh well, again, I'd say that obviously Heidelberg Alexander is probably the main one, because it was there for probably I suppose if you classify probably the longest period, 77 to probably 82, 83. Then I was at Footscray for a couple of years. What actually happened at Croydon was that it was 86. We'd won the championship in the state league, and I was working at Adidas, or Adidas as they call in Europe, America. I was working there, and Jimmy Campbell was working there as well. So that's why obviously we played together, we worked together. The families are extremely close. So anyway, I went to so I progressed within Adidas. I was in the warehouse. I was a supervisor. And then I went for a job as a sales rep. So I got that job. So basically I was on the road and so forth. And I'll never forget, I think Jimmy Campbell said to me, he says, "Oh, Peter wants to know, what's happening." And I said, "Well, what do you mean what's happening? I'm working, I'm traveling, I'm doing different things. So there's different priorities." So anyway, I ended up leaving Croydon. But again, Croydon was probably slightly less as far as the Heidelberg experience, if you want to classify it with what was going on. And again, I've still got guys. There's a guy I play with. He lives in Perth now, Matt McDonald. Matt and I are pretty close, and also we played at Croydon together. So when I left them and I went to Caulfield. Now again, Caulfield was a bit of a again back to, and I say they're a Greek club. I classify them as a Greek club. There might be some sort of ethnic differences there, but they'd come from like 4th division, 3rd division, 2nd division. So they progressed every single year. So they were and Taki Svengos, is it Svengos?
Yeah, Taki Svengos, yeah.
Yes. So Taki was a coach. Now, I didn't actually realise till a while ago. Actually, he also played for Heidelberg as well, Fitzroy as well, before I came. But anyway, so I was there. Another, I suppose, in the entertainment business, came and played with Coffee was David Brooks, or Brooksy. I think if you're aware of David Brooks, the music man. So Brooksy and I were there, and then they brought a couple of other players. And again, we had a wee bit of success, not a hell of a lot, sort of thing. So again, it was one of those things where I was there for a short period of time. Enjoyed my time there, and then actually ended up going to Nunawading.
That's interesting. So all the lads in that Music Men. So you played with David Brooks, who was part of the Music Men. You can look up. They did a skit on Hey Hey It's Saturday.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So did they? That would have been a good laugh around the club.
Oh yeah, Brooks is still new. Brooks is like I think now it's hashtag I'm not dead yet. Brooks is like 68. I think he's 67, 68. No, so Brooks is a guy who obviously he's a bit of kind of fitness fanatic at the moment. So and he lives down in, I think he lives in the kind of Brighton area. And he's one of the kind of, it's at the Icebergers. He loves getting into the cold water. I'm still to work out whether get into cold water or actually having cold showers. I need to maybe give Gary Cole a call later on today and find out exactly what it means. But Brooks was good in that respect, and he's obviously he's a character. And he actually went to Nunawading after I'd left Nunawading and go to one of my other clubs. He was there, and he had like Donny McLeod, he had George Campbell, he had Graham Hayes. The squad of players he had, I think they might have been in the 2nd division. You're talking about some, again, we've progressed in age, I think, but when it's all said and done, and I've said this a lot of times, skill doesn't, you might be slower, but your skill levels are still, they're not 100%, but they're not bloody zero. If you know what I mean, they're still fairly prominent. So you're talking about good quality players. But Brooks was a character at Caulfield. But again, it was one of those things where I went there and then I went to Nunawading. I was actually with Ian Greener, who obviously did extremely well from coaching and so forth. And again, it's you just kind of cross paths with different people and different clubs and so forth. And but no, it was just one of those kind of, as I was getting probably older and progressive. Although I ended up at Dandenong City. I said Gary McDowell was coaching at one stage at Dandenong City. But I'll never forget, it was probably one of the day when you say to yourself, no, this is it. I was actually, for whatever reason, I was playing in the reserves. We played Sunbury. I'll never forget it. Played Sunbury. And obviously you kick off at 1 o'clock. The first team played at 3 o'clock. So it was 1 o'clock. So we're playing the game, and after about 10 minutes, there was a massive hailstorm. And I mean, it was just horrendous. So everybody just scattered. And I'll never forget sitting behind the kind of dugout, and I'm sitting like that there, and I'm saying to myself, what am I doing here? It's 25 past 1 on a Saturday afternoon, and it's absolutely, it's a hailstorm, and it's horrific sort of thing. And I'm saying to myself, I could be doing other things, I could be doing other things sort of thing. I suppose in that respect, it was a thing I said, maybe I should just call it quits. But then what transpired after that was Brighton Celtic. It was again with Jimmy Tansey and a lot of other kind of identities, football identities from way back sort of thing. And again, it was probably more social than anything else, if you want to classify it sort of thing. But that was kind of, that was not say the end, because we ended up coming back and playing over 35s for Croydon, and that was, I'll not get into the story of that because it's quite a sad story, but it was kind of getting together of players. And again, you're talking like Gary Cole, myself, Davy Brogan, Jimmy Campbell, Graham Hayes, Frank McGrelis. There's a multitude again.
Yeah, a lot of NSL experience there.
But it was a social thing. We played on a Sunday morning. I remember playing games. We played. I'm trying to think we played. It was a kind of Serbian team, and they actually try to really intimidate the referee. And we're saying this, when you step over the line, it doesn't matter how old you are, you've got a competitive edge and you want to do well, sort of thing. But they took it to the nth degree. And we're just saying, this is a Sunday morning, just, leave them alone, leave the referee alone and so forth. So it'll be a bit off-putting. So you say to yourself, I'm not getting paid for this. This is more just a social thing. They really need this. But again, it was getting yourself out, getting in a social type environment sort of thing. And
kicking the ball around, trying to stay fit. Yeah.
The first game we played, this is Brighton Celtic. I'll never forget it. This is before the over 35s. Brighton Celtic, we played a team in Dendy Park. I can't remember. I think it was a Brazilian team. And we had, I'm sure it was 20 players. And the 20 players, any of the 20 players could have walked into any of the teams, 5 or 10 years before that. In fact, they all did. They played, state level, international, whatever may. We played, and there was one other player that played with us. There's a guy called Mike Conlon, who played for Fitzroy AFL. Now, Mickey grew up, I think, in the Cambria, so he kind of grew up with football or soccer. So he played, but he was the fittest of us all. He was just like a fitness fanatic. And we played this team, and I'll never forget it. We actually, I think we ended up winning something that was 15-1 or 16-1. It was just a bit of a debacle. But the incident in the game that just is etched in my brain is about 15, 20 minutes before the end of the game. It's 12-0 or something like that. The stage at 12-1. And their goalkeeper, the ball's going to the back of the net again. Their goalkeeper's just lying on the ground. He's just going, that's it. The jersey's come off, and he's just walked off. So they're going like this, and they're going, well, we need to. And I'll never forget it. One of the guys in the sidelines come on, and was the goalkeeper for the last 15, 20 minutes. He had dungarees on, and it was and he had his own shoes. It was like a surreal scene. You could have actually videoed it, and people are going, that never happened. Seriously, it happened. This guy was, and obviously he got about another 4 or 5 goals, but it was just one of those situations you say to yourself. And I've always said this: it's like Southern Hemisphere soccer. That's what it epitomises. So it was a good laugh.
You progressed and ended up playing football at the highest possible level here in Australia.
Yep.
So what advice do you have for that 15, 16, 17, 18-year-old boy or girl who wants to take their football to the next level?
Well, I suppose the kind of one word that needs to be brought into, especially nowadays, is dedication. You need to be. All kids, irrespective if it's male or female, everybody's got a kind of potential, and it's what people see in that potential, and obviously if they kind of bring the potential out. So you have to be very kind of focused. You have to be very dedicated. And again, the era I played in, even before that and so forth, it was probably a lot easier because there was less distractions. Now there's a multitude of distractions now for kids. That being said, you're in a situation where the sport has become, sport's a business when it's all said and done. But you're in a situation where it becomes quite expensive as well. You look at families, and especially, the way things have been going the last 15, 18 months, I'm sure there's people struggling, badly and so forth with the way the situation is. But, if you've got 2 or 3 kids and you're trying to, get them into, and a lot of the clubs have got fantastic, junior setups and so forth, but it's quite an expensive sport to be involved with, and I think that's something that needs to be addressed as well. But you need to be dedicated. You need to kind of be quite focused on it. The other thing you need to have as well, you need to have a bit of luck. Now, I've seen players over the years and so forth, and you say to yourself, you get naturally gifted players, and you've got players who have become good players, if you know what I mean. They're maybe not as naturally gifted as other players, but they've managed to work hard and they've got through it, sort of thing, So you need to have a wee bit of luck. You need to have somebody kind of like, you go to a club, and I'm probably kind of I'm going to say situation where obviously at Heidelberg, as I said before, Margaritas kind of took to me, and again, obviously with different coaches, Pulikakis and so forth, and Bob McLaughlin, Tony Bogie and so forth. But I managed to kind of go there, but Margaritas probably because was the one player that kind of pushed me, right? Then we come back in 1980, Len McKendy. Now, I'm not saying this is right or wrong, but I probably didn't suit his kind of style, or maybe there's something, so you don't change as a player, but the person who's actually making the decisions maybe changes you, if you know what I mean. So you need to have that wee bit of luck, and you need to have somebody kind of pushing you. Again, that being said, people open, it's like anything in life, whether it be a job, whether it be so forth, somebody will open the door and you've got to walk through the door, but then the door kind of closes a wee bit and then you've got to go and do it. You can't have that. You just need that wee bit of opportunity. So again, from a young kid's point of view, you look at, the thing is now, we didn't have the full time when I was playing. We didn't have the full time situation that they've got now in the A League, whether it's been the Victory or Western United or Melbourne City. And we'd have loved that. And I did see an article a while ago, which was there was talk about Heidelberg. This might have been 1979, 1980. They were actually going to offer full time contracts to certain players, and my name get mentioned. So obviously, again, that never came to fruition, which is disappointing. But it's one of those things where you say to yourself, I'd love to play this time at the moment, because the pitches are the way they are and all the setup and so forth. I've gone to the Victory games and the Melbourne City games and so forth. The only thing it kind of is just, and again, this is just not in Melbourne or Australia. This is probably a global thing now. And I watched games. I even watched the game the other night, and I'm saying to myself, the amount of times, and again, it's to do with possession. And if you look at other sports as well, look at AFL. Now, the AFL has now become a possession type sport. Whereas before it probably wasn't. It was probably more going forward all the time. Whereas now it's like they've got this thing in their mind, is if we've got the ball, same as soccer, football, if we've got the ball, they can't score. But when they're in attack, that's what annoys me. When they're in attack, and certainly in football, when they're in attack, and all of a sudden they're knocking the ball back and knocking the ball square, and they're not taking the opportunities, they're not taking the risks. It's not a very risk thing. So again, with kids, I think kids to a certain age, they should be coaching. They should just be letting the kids go and play, and their natural talent will come to the fore. When they get to an age where they can understand what you're trying to achieve, then that's what you do. But the problem being is that, and this should not be disrespectful to people that do it, because they might not do it for any sort of kind of compensation, any money. But you get situations where they see, because of exposure in Australia, we probably see more football around the world than any other country in the world. There's situations, they're seeing all these things happening in the Premier League, seeing things in South America, in Europe. So they're translated into buddies just for 6-year-olds. And you're saying, that's ridiculous. It's like they want to be like professional people instead of just letting the kids play. Just let them play. It's the same thing with any sport. But as I said before, once they get to that particular age group where you can actually say, right, they can understand what you're trying to achieve, then that's when the coaching starts from my perspective. So again, it's just my opinion.
Fantastic words of wisdom, King Kenny Taylor. Thank you so much for your contribution to Australian football. Really appreciated going down memory lane and reliving all the great teams that you played with.
Thank you, Sasha. I really enjoyed that sort of thing. So hopefully I haven't bored too many people. But look, it's as I said before, it's probably one of those things where you're actually, it's like, you can't see the tree for the forest type scenario. When you're actually involved in it, you don't really appreciate it. It's later on when you start to look back. And I suppose, look, when it's all said and done, we've all got egos, we're all egotistical to a certain extent. And it's like when you read something in the paper, you always want to read positives, you don't want to read negatives. But I've always said, as long as it's constructive criticism, and and again, nowadays you've got to be kind of careful, because if you go back to the days of the Alex Ferguson, the hairdryer, the David Beckham, this sort of stuff, and that's just very, very minor, I can assure you. Whereas nowadays you've got to be a bit more kind of mollycoddle to people, which again I'm not 100% with that. You've got to, if somebody's doing something wrong, it's like in a workplace. If you ask somebody to do something and they make a mistake, okay, they made a mistake. But if you ask them to do the same thing and they make the same mistake, then we'll get problems. But if you don't actually nip it in the bud, it's just going to continue. So again, look, thanks so much for your time. It's been much appreciated, and hopefully we can get this lockdown sooner than later.
Thank you so much. We wish you all the very best.
Thank you, Sasha. Thank you. Cheers. All the best.